Hello everybody, my name is Oleh, I'm a .NET developer, and today we are going to talk about the different ways to pass the connection string to the DbContext of the Entity Framework core. So which are these ways and which advantages and disadvantages these ways do have. So let's proceed. First of all, we go to the project we have created previously about the cache busting, and we've assumed that we have already added the DbContext, the simplest one with just one table, and we have this one entity, but currently we don't have any way of adding this context to the web application. So what is the way to go here? So there are two ways. The first one is to use the dependency injection in the program CS and to inject the DbContext with the settings the simplest way. So builder.services.add DbContext, and here we can add the context of our type. So the type of our context is a sample some data context, and here we should provide the connection string. So we have to do this one: builder use SQL server, and then we have to provide the connection string. So the most probably simplest way is to just to hard code this string, so it can be done this way, and we can test whether it's working by using this context in the view, but this is not the best way. So first I should say this. So but let's try to figure out whether it's working or not. So we just can add here the DbContext. So inject this some DbContext, some data context, and let's try this one on our index page. So for example, here while we are using Blazor, so we have to use the Blazor approach in order to get this running. So, and here we should override the on initialized method. So, and here we can access some, for example, let's create one person. So it will be of type person. So we have this person, and let's give it a try to get the first person in the DbContext. So we can go with this one. Person is context persons, for example, first default async, let it be. And let's make this one async one. While we are using the async method, we should add the async here. So because it's an async overload. So let's figure out whether this the most obvious DbContext insertion is working now. So running this one, the application is starting, and yeah, we have a kind of exception. So code with configuration, but we do not have the constructor for this one. So yeah, what should we add in this case? So first of all, what we are doing here, so we are adding a DB connection string with use SQL server by the constructor. But if we go here and look here, so there is obviously no constructor in this class, but the DbContext has one. So we need just to pass the constructor to this base class. So how we can do that? So first of all, we need to write the constructor of the type which is needed for the case. So it will be public our some data context, and we should include our options which we are specifying here. So it will be the DbContext options builder to the constructor. So it will be DbContext options, and the one thing, and this DbContext options also should be typed as our context. So, and also we need to pass this param to our base constructor. So we are using the keyword base, and we are passing these options to the base constructor. So here, this is the constructor in order to get this thing running. And let's try with this code in the index. So, and probably it's another breakpoint. And let's see, yeah, so we are getting person here, so everything works. But there is the first case that it's obvious that it's not a good way to use the connection string this way. So how we can figure it out? It can be quite simple, because we have the web application builder here, and we can just easily replace this one with getting our connection string from the acceptance.json here. So how we can do that? First of all, we can go with var connection string, and it will be the builder dot configuration dot get connection string, and let's provide the name which it has in the acceptance.json file. So here we can do this way. So it is probably just almost just the same as we have done earlier in the console project, but here we have the simpler approach because we have this builder which creates the scope of this connection string by default. So we shouldn't in this applet we shouldn't explicitly specify the JSON file, the location of this file, and so on. So acceptance.json file is how it's to say so our default settings file, and the naming should be just this case. So if we are not using the custom naming, everything should be okay in this case, and we can easily replace the whole string here with our connection string got from the configuration. So it will be our const string, and this way it should work without any problems. So let's start and let's try. Yeah. So here we have our person received from the database, but unfortunately we have the second approach in this way, because we have also one useful method in the DbContext, and it's called onConfiguring. So why and when should we use this method? So first of all, let's create a copy of this entire file, and let's give it another name, onConfiguring. yeah, so it will be our DbContext, but with using the configuring method. So for some brevity, I have done it via the new file. So in this approach, we do not have this constructor, but we need a bit of another approach. So first of all, if we are going to specify the connection string here inside the DbContext, and we have the override method on configuring this one, we should have also the constructor of the DbContext here. So it will be the public our context, and it will have not the options as the example before, but it will have the option. It will have the I configuration. So I configuration is just the thing we are using in the program.cs file. So it will be I configuration. And here also we need to specify the field for our configuration to be the dependency injected. So doing this way, we are just injecting our dependency of configuration to the DbContext, and then injecting the DbContext as a dependency to other classes. So it will be like a dependency injection cascade. So let's have the configuration here. My configuration. It would be better be a private one. And here we can easily specify the configuration equals configuration. So this way the dependency injection works. And after that we can easily configure here. So when we have this options builder, we can do this way. The options builder dot use SQL Server, and here we should provide the configuration string. So configuration dot get connection string, and then we should specify that name which it has in the now absence JSON file. So here this will be the name. So just this way. And also we can do it as a read-only, because it's initialized just from the constructor, and yeah, and here we have this constructor. So, and just to ensure that this one will be working, we can just go to the program.cs, and instead of this one we can add some data DbContext on configuring, and without specifying the connection string here. So this will be not used in our second scenario. So let's run it and test whether it works. But one moment. Yeah, so while we have injected the DbContext named as in previous approach, we need to alter the name here. So in order to get the DbContext which we have configured, and the same one which we are going to use. So, and let's see. Yeah, so here we have a valid person. But let's try also one more scenario where we are getting, for example, it will be the first person, and also we will have the last person. And here the last person will be just wait context dot persons dot last to default async. So this way. And let's try this case assuming that we are getting the data both of the leading person and the trailing one from our DbContext. So this way. Yeah, and here is another case. So let's look at it. And we see that, one moment, we have a case with the last to default. Yeah, so for example, let's alter a bit. So, for example, let's provide it. Let's order it by descending person ID and yeah, and use here the first default async. And let's look at it. Yeah, so currently we have both this one and this one here using the DbContext. But in Blazor server sometimes this case scenario can lead to the potential concurrency issues. So when we have simultaneously multiple usages of the same context, and we need to ensure the additional security on these scenarios. So how we can figure this out? The one of the used approaches here, which can be done, is by adding not first of all not exactly the DbContext, but adding the DbContext factory. So here we have another method which is add DbContext factory. So this way, and we have the factory. So the factory which produces the instances of the DbContext. And we can also in this way inject the DbContext factory like this, not injection the context, but inject as DbContext factory and specify the context which we have. So for example this one, and let it be factory. So, but it's when we do not want to modify this injection and use just the DbContext in the application, we can go one another way here. So not by injecting the DbContext factory, but by explicitly adding the DbContext from this factory, so as a service. So what we need to do is just after this adding the DbContext factory, we can go with builder.services dot add scoped type of our DbContext type add scoped, and we can provide the DbContext from exactly our factory. So we can do this way. So service provider dot get service. Let's specify type of DbContext factory dot some data on configuring, and we need to first of all to instantiate this service, and then to create the DbContext. So here, and we are adding the DbContext this way. So this approach this approach guarantees that our DbContext used for each time will be just the new one, because the DbContext factory always produces a new DbContext instance for every request. So let's try it. And here we see that we have both persons filled with data. So everything is correct, and this approach is quite better if we are just using the Blazor, especially Blazor server application. So hopefully this video can be useful for you. If you have any comments or suggestions, please write to me, and have a